quick quip here. The applause reminded me of this. So one of the first things that we taught my daughter was how to clap, or that she sort of picked up was clapping. In Portuguese, it's palmingas. In English, it's obviously clap. And it's funny to watch her clap, but if there's applause happening on the screen, or like on TV for whatever reason, like I was watching, what the hell was I watching today? The Grand Tour. And they come back into the studio and everybody's clapping and all that stuff in the studio. She'll look at the TV and she'll start clapping every single time. And it doesn't matter what's going on. She always will start clapping if she hears applause on TV. So I think it's fantastic. Let me say a couple of, hello everybody. Happy Saturday. It's good to see you all. It's going to be a little different stream today. I'm not going to go through all the hellos today. I'm going to say a few thank yous to those that have resubbed and whatnot. And then we'll kind of get this show on the road here. So Iowa Scotsman, thank you very much for 9 months, man. Appreciate, or for 39 months, 9 minutes. For 39 months. Cheers, man. Thank you very much, dude. Ernie the Cat's also here for 39 months. Did we just hit 39 today? I think we did. Thank you very much, Ernie. Appreciate that, buddy. Cheers. And Serby is here for 31 months as he's self-quarantining. Cheers. We'll say hello to Citation Max, the one and only Citation Max, of course. I'm drinking water again today. I might have a beer later, but not right now. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. So today we have a little different stream. As I mentioned yesterday, we kind of do this every single year. Have the opportunity to talk to Mr. Evan Ryder. Is it Ryder?
It is.
Every time I talk to you, I ask you how you say your last name.
You'll remember one of these years.
Mr. Evan Ryder from FlightSimExpo fame. So what is your official title, Evan, with FlightSimExpo? Do you have one?
I guess I would say co-founder, but not really.
Co-founder, but okay. So Evan Ryder here, the co-founder, but not really of FlightSimExpo. And we're gonna talk about the coronavirus for 2 hours, because that's definitely not what you're sick of hearing about. No, we're gonna talk about a lot of other stuff too. So first of all, thank you, Evan, for joining me today. While Evan is saying his introduction, I'm going to start this airplane up and try to put it up in the air and see if we can go put something in the background while we're having a chat. So Evan, I'll turn it over to you, man. If you want to introduce yourself, talk about what you do, where you're from, and talk a little bit about how you got started with this event.
Sounds good, Ty. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for having me. I think co-founder, but not really, is probably a good title. Phil and I started this event now coming up on 3 years ago. Ran our first show in Las Vegas back in 2018. And at the time it was, let's see what's out there and let's see what we can do to bring the community together. We thought maybe we would get 300 or 400 people to attend the event, and we were shocked to have 1,100. And so we obviously kept the train rolling, ran our second event last year in Orlando, similar type time frame, beginning of summer and of spring. And again, 1,650 on the attendance. So we're excited to see that continued growth and that support from across the community. And that's really what keeps us going, and partially also what got us started as well. Outside of the FlightSimExpo world, I'm a controller on VATSIM. You may have seen me screw around with Ty various times.
Oh yes, you never say hello to me. You always say hello to Max, but you never actually say hello to me.
Somehow I just don't recognize your voice.
Well, we got to work on that then.
Yeah, I know. You'd think I'm looking for you flying in one of these little puddle jumpers, but then it's like I get thrown off when you're in an airliner,
So Friday nights are almost always airliners, and I always fly with the call sign 717. So you can bet your ass if it's a Friday night and you see 717, it's either me or it's somebody trying to troll me.
You just really want me to acknowledge you, don't you?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, it makes me feel good. There was this time a couple of years ago. We were on an F&O. It was Miami down to San Juan. It was the biggest gong show of an F&O I think I've ever flown in, and it was absolutely crazy. But trying to get out of Miami, there was probably a 45-minute line of traffic trying to get out, and there was this kid, a young kid, in a 747 that sort of leapfrogged everybody. And the controller wouldn't let him take off. He put him in the penalty box and says he's going to wait until the guy that was behind you says, all right, it's your turn. So as all of this is going on, we're all having a good time, this and that. I get a lineup, or I get a shout out from another pilot. Pilot says, hey, can you give a shout out to American 717 or whatever it happened to be? And the controller was like, well, why don't I get a shout out? But he gave me a shout out anyway. Felt pretty good about that. And then that entire line of taxiing just sort of went on, and there were bad radio calls that were made. So I was making bad radio calls just to have fun with the controller, and it was an absolutely rambunctious group of people on tower. That's the kind of stuff we aim for, man. That's why you do an F&O.
Yeah. Well, you're I guess not noteworthy enough. So I don't know if that means you need to be more difficult, but I don't notice you in a bad way when you're on frequency, so I think it's a good thing.
Well, we can work on that.
yeah I don't know if I probably should be careful what I wish for, right?
So So tell me before we get into the FS Expo stuff. I have an admission. Most of the guys here know this. I tend to seek out FNOs because they're pure chaos, and a lot of times things don't really go super great because of the just sheer number of planes coming in. So from a controller side, like how does that look and how does that work?
It's basically the right idea.
Okay.
What you're saying there. I mean, it definitely gets interesting, especially at an airport like Boston, which is of course the only place I've really done any significant
Yep.
controlling for FNOs, where we just basically have one arrival runway. And
Mhm.
so it would be lovely if you could do that with half the traffic a lot of the time. But I will say with the new audio for VATSIM, and when you have a good group of pilots, which believe it or not does happen from time to time, it's actually a lot of fun. And sometimes it does get a little crazy, but we've run some, and the best ones that we run actually these days are the ones where we have New York and DC together,
Yeah.
and we'll do like one of those 3-part airport events, and that way the amount of traffic for each airport is sort of reasonable. We've run that event every year, the Northeastern Corridor, and it's
Yep.
gone like flawlessly. We basically had to be able to do it with no holding, the odd little bit of a delay vector here and there, but it's been great.
Yeah, every time I fly up there, it's great. Like I love it. I do have to say something. I do have to say, I was flying yesterday. We flew into Kansas City. Actually, Kansas City FNO went really well last night. I noticed that pretty much the entire United States had controllers online except for Boston and New York.
Oh.
Not to rub it in or anything.
I don't know where we all were last night. I was actually out for dinner with some friends, braving the wide world out there.
Quarantined, perhaps.
Scary. Yeah, maybe that's what it
This
was.
172 feels real heavy right now for some reason. What is going on?
Retard.
Yeah, it's all good. Anyway, let's. We were here to talk about FS Expo, so.
Do you need some? Where did you take off from?
Page. Maybe it's because we're. Oh, you know what? Because it's
How high
4,300
are you? Do you
feet.
need
Yeah,
some,
it's
yeah, I was
4,300
gonna say, do you need
feet.
some mixture maybe?
Oh yeah, you're probably right. I'm a pilot. She dogging, man. It's all right though.
Oh, that looks better. There you go.
Yeah. We're getting some oomph out of her. Trying
Yeah.
to find that 90 knots there so we can climb our 170. It's also pretty windy, it seems. It's okay. We're gonna try to get through the Grand Canyon while we talk this afternoon. So we'll have to see what's more interesting.
I think the Grand Canyon's gonna beat me.
No pressure.
Thanks.
So let's talk about Expo, man. First of all, why don't we talk about the coronavirus, because that's almost certainly the topic that's going to come up. How is that impacting you guys, and sort of what considerations or concessions are having to be made yet?
Yeah, I mean, so thank you to I think the Redbird posted our little PDF there in the
Nice.
chat, so thank you for that. Saves me from having to do it. The answer and where we stand right now on that question is we just think it's too soon to make a decision, right? Our event is still 3 months away. Everything that I've seen that's been canceling, maybe with one exception, which we were just talking about, pretty much everything we've seen that's canceling is either happening in March or, it's been postponed, but it's been postponed to April, May. I haven't seen too many events that are in the summer, late spring, early summer, that are making these decisions right now. And in my view, I think it's just too soon. We've seen historically a lot of our attendees register between about May 12th or 13th and the show. We would typically double, if not more than double, the number of attendees registered in that 1 or 2 months before the event. And so for that reason, I'm assuming most people, I'm sure there are some people that have registered and that have made the travel plans, but I imagine a lot of people probably wouldn't be thinking about this even until May, until April, that kind of thing. So from our perspective, we really would like to just leave this be and see what happens, and think we're probably going to know a whole lot more about what's going on in a month or two and be in a much better position to make that determination then. So that's where we are.
Okay. Full Visitor Not Found has registration and plane tickets.
See?
One thing I will say, so I bought my tickets back in like December because flights were already getting absurd from Boston to Las Vegas because Boston sucks. And I booked mine with points and all that stuff, so I didn't really spend that much money on them. But I went and checked flights the other day, and the tickets are like half to a third of the price that they were showing up when I originally tried to book.
Yeah, so in some ways it's almost like if you were able to, especially if you're able to book something that has
Mm-hmm.
either a refund on it or that has a change waiver on it, which basically every airline now is offering, this
Yeah.
would actually be a great time. Even if you're not sure that you're going to attend, this would be a great time to book a plane ticket. I mean, the hotel is fully cancelable. I would just assume you don't register for FlightSimExpo if you're not planning to come. But from a hotel perspective, you can get a refund there. If you can get a $100 or something trip to Las Vegas, and the worst case scenario is you have a $100 credit with Delta that you can use again, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. So are you I had a really intelligent question there and I forgot what it was.
Well, I guess what I'll say is that from our perspective, as long as we have people kind of working with us as opposed to against us. So when
Right.
it comes to our exhibitors, our diamond sponsors, and even right down to the attendee level, as long as people are generally okay with waiting about a month and talking about this again in mid-April, I think we'll be in a much better place to be able to make a decision as to how we want to move forward. And so that's really the messaging that we'd like to share today and sort of moving forward. And that's more or less what that PDF that was linked earlier says is let's be patient. We don't really have to make a decision today. And if exhibitors can stick with us, if sponsors can stick with us, and if people are okay with talking about this again in a couple weeks, that's what we'd like to do. The challenge for us is going to be if we have a scenario, and unfortunately it hasn't happened yet, where a number of our exhibitors, a number of our sponsors, or a big number of our attendees are saying, no, I just can't do this. I need
Right.
to pull handles now. And if that starts to happen, then we're in a bit of a tough spot, because if we want to run the event, and if, say, there is no health concern, but half of the exhibitors are saying, no, I've already canceled back in March, I'm not going to change my mind, now we're in a bit of a tough spot because nobody wants to come and see half the community. But I think as long as people stick together, and that's what people have been doing so far,
Yeah.
then that allows us to really make this decision in about a month. And from what I'm hearing on social media, from what I'm seeing in comments, from what I'm getting in emails, that seems to be what people are thinking is the best approach.
Nice. So you exhibitor wise, like most of the there's a solid chunk of folks that are from Europe, right?
Yes, and again, I mean, obviously, we have a travel ban
Yeah, it's only
situation
30
going
days
on
though.
right now. That's the thing, right? So, like,
Yeah.
let's look at it on April 15th. Does that get extended? Is that stopped? Has that
Right.
been modified? And the other thing we look at is, and this is actually really kind of a convenient thing for us, a number of the major sports leagues have postponed their stuff. A number of major shows, major events have, like Sun and Fun, for example, have postponed rather than
Right.
canceling. So, is the NBA and the NHL, are they back on in mid-April? Because that's definitely something for us to look at. Does Sun and Fun go ahead at the end of May, or does it move again? So those are kind of the things we'd like to be able to keep an eye on and should look at as we try to make our own determinations.
Yeah. And Max says it's probably going to be longer than that. I think there's a good chance they're going to extend the 30 days out, or that the opposite will happen and Europe will say, all right, well, US, you're peaking now, so don't come to us, sort of
Right.
thing. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens. But yeah, it's all kind of conjecture and whatnot at this point, until we know more. I think, like, me personally, we talked about this beforehand. I think that, like, the next 2 weeks or so are going to be pretty telling. You kind of see what the North American response and whatnot's going to be, and then go from there.
Yeah, I think all this stuff too, like the fact that people are taking it seriously. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be a health expert, and I'm not going to comment on whether, is it the right thing to do quarantines and is it not? Like, I have no idea, right?
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the fact that so many of these things have canceled and that people are generally staying home more to hopefully limit the spread of the virus,
Yep.
that's also great for us at Expo, because if we can, start to reduce the amount of spread that's happening, hopefully that means that is when it comes to May or when it comes to April, things look a lot better, right?
Right. I agree. Jeff makes a Jeff makes a point here. Jeff Fabiano. He says that NASCAR is going to possibly be running an iRacing instead. I think I saw something the other day that there was a race between two professional drivers in, it might have been an iRacing or one of the sims.
Really?
I know that the esports community is like salivating right now because
Yeah,
everything
they're
else
loving
is
this.
yeah, right. Everything else is done,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Hey, man, we're still going to play in our games. How about that?"
I'm sure it's a good time on. I was controlling the other night on VATS, and it was like
Yeah.
a little busier than average. I'm sure it's got to be busy there this weekend. Like, what
Oh,
else are
it's gonna
people
be
doing? They're just
insane.
all stuck in their homes, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be insane the next couple of weeks. It's too bad that all the 2020 stuff didn't happen. And, well, I mean, okay, so the whole situation sucks, but it's going to happen. Yada yada. It's too bad that we weren't a little closer to the release of 2020, where people could, really dive into that.
Yeah, I know. And I wonder how that changes their plans. Like, I know I'm assuming actually that E3 was a big, part
Right.
of Microsoft's strategy for when that software was going to be released. So I wonder what happens next.
Well, so Microsoft, has a console release coming up this year, the Xbox Series X, along with Sony and the PlayStation 5 as well. So this E3 was potentially going to be a big tent pole for them, just showing off new consoles and this and that. So as far as that goes, like I think they're still going to do something virtually. I think is the last thing I had heard, which I'm sure that means they'll feature all the same stuff they would have featured in the show. Just with a little bit less hands-on time and a little bit less journalist time, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see what comes. Like, this is going to be an awesome. Well, it would have been an awesome E3, but it's going to be an awesome time of the year anyway. Hey, maybe that means we can get a Sobo to come to Expo now.
I know. Or maybe Microsoft will
you
do
gotta work
something.
on it, man.
I know. Well, that'll certainly be one of the things we talk about. And wouldn't it be interesting? Like, not saying it'll happen, but wouldn't it be interesting if, the Microsoft Flight 20 or the 2020 team kind of looked at that and said, well, maybe there's an opportunity to launch this in conjunction with FlightSimExpo, even if it wasn't at our show and even if it wasn't them being there, but if it came out the week before, whenever we end up having a show, that would certainly be great for a lot of our exhibitors and great for our attendees, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a not completely, somewhat related question, but LSRP Net asks about your thoughts on F1, and since you're a non-American, I'm assuming that you have thoughts on F1 beyond, hey, it exists.
I'm assuming I know who's asking these questions, so I'm not going to answer that. They already know.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So that's the coronavirus. Like, it's happening. It's a situation in flux. Things are going to be changing, and we'll obviously know more when you go on the next stream, in a couple of weeks down the road. For the time being, though, let's talk about 2020.
Yeah.
Actually, before we talk about 2020, will there be enough toilet paper at the convention center?
That's a great question. I don't know. I should have asked that question at our site visits.
You will now.
Yeah, that'll be my very first question when I walk into the door of a new property. How much toilet paper do you stock, like a number of days?
I want to know sheets.
Days or sheets
I want to know
per
sheets per person, sheets per attendee.
Yeah.
And are you limiting your staff usage of our toilet paper that we're paying handsomely for?
That's a good question too, yeah.
Yep. That's a very sort of late-stage capitalism question, if you will.
We could kind of offer discounts. Like, if you're going to bring your own roll to the show, maybe we give you $10 off.
Yeah. If you bring your own portable bidet, you don't need any.
I don't get, do people not use, soap and toilet paper regularly? That it's when there's a potential that you might have to be at home for a week that you have to stock up on this? Like, is it that? Are people running that desperate on their supplies?
I have no idea. I think that's the $1 million question right now. It's like people get thrown into pandemonium and fear, and there's always something that they sort of latch onto. Like, around here, the snowstorms, it's always bread, milk, and eggs. The French toast crisis. And I'm sure it's similar up in your neck of the woods too.
Are they buying toilet paper on the subscription plan, one roll per month, or what? I mean, who? It's like it goes bad. I just have a stack of it in my closet.
You can go. I mean, you can get the subscription plan on Amazon Prime, and it just sort of shows up. And it's like, well, if it doesn't show up, then what happens?
I guess so. Yeah.
If you got to run some real thin margins. There's a whole God, what are we? There's a whole manufacturing, it's like lean manufacturing, but for storing toilet paper.
I guess so. Yeah.
Anyway, 2020, man. Let's talk about 2020. So what's going on this year? What's new this year?
So Captain's Corner, which is not new, has some really cool new things in it. So I think we could start with that.
Okay.
One of the biggest things that we're excited about, I actually wanted to do this when we were in Orlando, but finally we did it this year, or at least we hope we're doing it this year, is to try and build a computer on stage. That was one of the things that, for me, I've been a long-time simmer, but I've never actually built my own computer, and hardware is just not really my thing. I mean, I don't think it's that hard, but I just don't know.
Right.
So I went and found a friend of Flight Shops, is actually the guy who built his computer, and know who I'm talking about, and you will have seen the process that went into all this. He's actually coming down to Vegas, and he's going to take a whole bunch of parts, some of which have been donated and some of which we're going to buy, and he's going to put this all together on stage. So it's going to kind of be like a cooking show theme. We'll have Steve up there with a camera walking around so you can see what's going on, and they're just going to talk through it, and in like 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to see this whole thing get built. And so that's going to be really interesting. And then after that, we're going to have a raffle with everyone who's in Captain's Corner, and someone's going to actually walk out the door with that PC that they built on stage.
Now you're doing that at the beginning of the show, so you can spend the next 36 hours customizing and installing P3D,
Exactly.
right?
Walking around and trying to figure out what are the other add-ons you need
Yep.
to add to it.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. I think it's a great idea, man. So what sparked that? Like, what sparked that idea? Anything?
That came from the community, actually. It was one of the suggestions in our survey at the end of the event last year.
Huh.
People really wanted to see more on hardware. We did a Q&A on it in Orlando, and we had like what should I do? How should I tweak and tune or whatever? And people were like, all right, that's really cool, but what if I want to build it myself? So we thought, let's actually go and do it this way.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be exciting. And when is that? Is that happening in the Captain's Corner? Or sorry, is that like Saturday?
Yeah, that's Captain's Corner. So that
Captain's
kicks
Corner.
off the show actually first thing at 12:30 p.m. on the Friday.
Okay.
And then the rest of Captain's Corner, that also all came from attendee feedback. So we went out with the attendee group right after the show in Orlando, basically. We went out to actually the exhibitors and we said, okay, who wants to present something in Captain's Corner? We got about 10 responses back. We sent out a survey to the community. We said, here's the 10 potential seminars. What of those do you guys want to see? And then the 5 that you actually see were the top 5 that were voted there. So Orbic's doing a concept to talk on PBR techniques for scenery modeling. You've got Aerosoft there, Real Sim Gear, and then X-Plane. And those were the 5 that got picked by community members in that survey we did. So again, just trying to make everything as community driven as possible. And it seems to me like it's come out with some pretty cool different topics on some very different concepts.
I accidentally clicked my door and opened it, and now it's fluttering in the breeze here, and I can't seem to
I've
close
done that
it.
I did that once in a Warrior in real life, and I know there's like a technique in the POH for how to close it. I could not get that door closed till we landed.
No, I think it's Uh-oh. Oh, no.
Yeah, it was nice, actually. It was the summer. It was really warm outside, so it actually kind of helped.
Yeah, I did that. I did that actually last year on one of my. I did a big long cross country, and before one of the taking off one of the 3-hour legs in the morning, I forgot to pull the door. I forgot to latch the door, and I'm like, the plane's pulling. It sounds really windy in here, and I look over. I'm like, oh no, and I took off. I took off, and it was like 300-foot ceilings taken off. I'm like, well, we're not going back. So put the wing leveler on and did my best to try to get the damn thing. I eventually did get it latched. A very frightening way to start the morning.
Yeah, that's nice.
So who all's in the Captain Corner then? So you mentioned the computer build, you mentioned Orbex.
Yeah, and then in addition to those 3, Real Sim Gear, who is doing a presentation on kind of getting started with the hardware that you might add to your setup. So, you've got a computer, you've got your joystick, you've got the basics there. Do you go and get a panel? Do you go and get a, radio stack? Like what's kind of the next step? And he's even going to cover some of the do-it-yourself stuff. And so just a nice, easy, I've got my nice setup here. What's the best bang for my buck when I want to add that next piece to it?
So Anthrax 91 or Anthrax GS 91, my buddy Jose has a question. Will hardware exhibitors be providing sales or pre-order purchases during the event?
Yeah, well, I think Austin is doing a great job of answering the chat for me. I don't know why he didn't want to come on the stream today. So
wait, is Austin the Redbird?
I'm assuming it is. I don't know who he is, but I think that's him.
Okay. Well, he's
answering like he's part of the conference team. So I'm assuming he's probably Austin.
Well, let's just verbalize
it too.
Works for me, Matt. Oh, it's training. Okay. Well, let's just verbalize that then.
Okay. Yeah, well, basically, it's what he said, more or less. But we love for exhibitors to sell products on site, and we have had people selling in the past in our last 2 years. We've been trying to encourage more of that. But, of course, if you're coming from Europe or if you're coming from across the country, it's a big logistics effort. If you make something like Real Sim Gear does to try to bring like 10 or 15 of those panels to Vegas, you've got to pay for the shipping, pay for the handling, and then what happens if you don't sell them all while you're there? So a lot of us, we're trying to make exhibitors, we're trying to encourage exhibitors to do that. But on top of what Austin mentions, the tax item, which is definitely a factor, it's just a lot of work to bring that stuff. So I think what we're trying to encourage people to do is do pre-sales like was just suggested there, and to try to encourage people in advance of the show to place their orders. And that way, at least you kind of know that if you bring five of them are going to be sold. Right. And that probably makes it a bit easier to bring more. But that's definitely feedback we get every year in our survey. And that's feedback we pass on to our exhibitors every year as part of the process. In fact, this year, as we get set up for the show, we've sent out our exhibitors manual that basically explains, here's when you can load in and here's how you send stuff to the show. Okay. The first page of that manual is, here's the feedback that came to us from attendees after the show last year. So anything that you guys sent in to us, we're feeding back to the exhibitors so that hopefully they can continue to move on those items and improve the things that you felt they needed to improve upon.
And were you able to share like generally like what kind of feedback that was?
Yeah, I mean the literally the number one. I can send you a picture of it if you want, but literally number one is the ability to buy on site.
Okay.
That was the
Okay.
most frequent comment we heard. The other stuff that's on there, encouraging exhibitors to offer discounts specific to the show. So
Mm-hmm.
if they maybe aren't a hardware vendor, but they sell software, giving people a little coupon that they can use to save 5% or whatever on the product when they go buy it online. People were encouraging, and it's funny, this came up actually even before the coronavirus world, but health practices was a factor in our attendee survey last year. So, making sure that we're wiping down headsets between users or making sure that we're keeping their stations clean. Obviously, you've got a lot of people that are flowing in and out of these sim setups that they're all trying. So that was a comment that came up as part of the survey.
Okay.
We were encouraged for more exhibitors to announce new products. And this is one I wish people would do more. We'd love to make this event sort of the if not annual, then at least every 6 months, kind of the opportunity for people to share their new products. I wish that more sim companies would use shows like ours and Cosford to try to announce big things. It seems like instead they just kind of announce them whenever they're done, which is just partially, I think, a factor of us being in a relatively
Yeah.
niche community. And it's like, hey, I've got something, I really want to share it, right? I don't want to sit on it for 3 months. But if people would do that a little more, then I think it would make for some really exciting news. So that was feedback we got. And then the other one was, especially for some of the bigger booths that had hardware, like the one that Scholarkey had with the A320 cockpit, was for people to consider taking reservations or tickets. So, that booth was obviously lined up the entire time, as you might expect. Maybe you could take a ticket, take a number, that kind of thing, and come back, as opposed to having to actually stand in line. So those were the 6 or 7 different sort of themes that came up as
Okay.
part of this.
I was pretty impressed last year at the number of hardware vendors that there were.
Yeah,
Like I don't think we had that many in Vegas, did we? The year before?
No, I think we had a lot of software in Vegas, a lot of hardware in Orlando,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the surveys from Vegas said there wasn't enough hardware, and the survey in Orlando said there was too much hardware. We're like, come on.
So what does the split look like this year?
I'd have to go look at the website, but I think it's closer to 50-50. I mean, we've got a lot of, like, there's some people that just do hardware. So I think we've got, just doing a quick count here, 11
Okay.
of just hardware. So that's people like Honeycomb, Thrustmaster, Real Sim Gear, Javiator, Virtual Fly. Like, they basically just make hardware. And then you've also got some that are in the real world mix as well. So Precision Flight Controls, they're hardware, but they also, of course, do software. Redbird, Gleim, they're kind of spanning both. So I would say you're looking at about 15 or so of the hardware people. And then looking at our software category, it's probably a little bit around the double. It's about 30, I'm going to guess, of the sort of more traditional software type players. But again, ProSim, who consider themselves a software, they certainly make lots of hardware as well. And, some of those software people are simulator platforms. So what do you consider those to be?
Right. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
but I would say it's a little bit more of a. I think we have a nicer balance this year. I would think people will be pretty happy with the mix of exhibitors you can see. And of course, obviously things are slowing down a little bit for us in exhibitor sales land, but it's only
Mm-hmm.
March, and we still take exhibit booth applications all the way through to May. So there's lots of opportunity for that to increase. We were certainly predicting to be well above what we saw last year in Orlando, and I think depending on how things play out and what happens in the next couple of weeks, I think you'll see that number start to increase again too.
Nice. Is there, and you don't have to answer this question, but is there any exhibitor that is going that you're super happy to see that wasn't
All
there
of them?
last year?
No, I mean, there's
any
a couple.
surprises?
There's a couple cool ones. Like, we're happy to have Precision Flight Controls with us for the first year. We've reached out to them now for a number of years, and they're a big manufacturer of the sort of real world flight sim hardware,
Mm-hmm.
but yet another example of the company that makes stuff for the real world business sort of flight school market that's now also really interested in our little world here in enthusiast flight simulation. So we were super excited to have them join in for the first time this year. And there's a number of companies that I really can't talk about that have sort of either were talking to us or that have approached us and that are
Okay.
really interested, and we just haven't gotten a commitment from them yet because, of course, with what's happening in the world right now, there's a number of companies that are like, yes, we're interested in, if there was no coronavirus, we would be there. And right now,
Right.
in some cases, they're, travel restricted or they're limited from making any new commitments for events until who knows when. So I think if a few of those come to pass, there'll be some pretty exciting names that are added to the website, but it'll all depend on how things play out in the next couple of weeks.
Nice. So how about on the speaking side of things? The last year I didn't get to attend any panels, but are there any panels
It's hard
that
to
stick
get there,
out?
isn't it?
Yeah, and I was only there for a day last year, which is kind of unfortunate. But are there any panels this year that you're kind of excited about? Obviously all of them, but
Yeah, well, yeah, one of the ones that we're really excited about is Rod Machado. I mean, that's just like your classic name from
Mhm.
FSX, the person who narrated all the original lessons. He was actually someone that reached out to us and
No
said,
kidding.
"I've seen your event. I'm super excited about it." You know, he's obviously had a background in simulation. He's a flight instructor in real life. He's an author as well. So his comment was, "I would love to be part of this show. How can I help?" And so we've thought we could put on a pretty interesting panel with him talking about how you can use this stuff for real world benefit. As you know, I'm
Yeah.
sure you and many of the
Oh,
others who are
100%.
watching
Yeah.
have heard and seen, right? So that's a really exciting one for us. We've got, the thing I'm excited about more than a specific panel is the fact that other than about I'm going to say two people, and I'm not including that there's a bit of a caveat here, but other than two people, everyone who's speaking this year is new. We
Yeah.
haven't had speaking for us in the past. So that's really cool. We try to keep the schedule fresh. We don't want to just repeat the same things over and over again. Exception to that'll be the getting started with at-home simulation thing, because obviously that's targeted toward new simmers. So
Right.
we want to run that every time because they haven't seen it before. Other than that, though, everything else is new. The other one I'll highlight here that I was really excited to add, we've been reaching out to the National Transportation Safety Board for 3 years now, finally got through this year. And we have the performance and basically structures analyst at the NTSB who, amongst other things, used simulation, and that includes literally FSX, the same stuff that we're using at home, to help decide whether or not it was possible for Sully to bring the A321 back to the airport, or whether the Hudson was really the only option. And I got to tell you, he made a comment to me as well. He's like, the way that it was portrayed in the movie is not at all like what actually
Yeah.
happened, just
Well,
for the
that's how it
record,
always
right?
works.
Yeah, but really interesting, and I didn't even know this, that the NTSB is using FSX in most of the recreations they do to actually present their accident report summaries
Huh.
to the board. So they have obviously some more advanced tools, but they'll actually pull out FSX and they'll use the camera views in FSX to recreate what the airplane did, and that's what they show when they actually sort of present us a draft report and they're looking for approval. Is
Oh,
they're
that's
using FSX
fascinating.
and then a whole bunch of other stuff. So
So they're
John
gonna be
O'Callahan is the presenter,
they're
and
gonna
he's
be
going to
talking
talk
about
about
that
all this stuff.
process.
Yeah, so he's got three specific case studies that we sort of talked about, like 9 or 10 different ones, and we thought we picked the most interesting that would appeal to the audience. So we've got, of course, US Air 1549. The other one he's looking at is the American 587 accident, so the one out of JFK, where the FO was all over the rudder pedals and basically ended up getting the airplane to the point where it couldn't hold together anymore.
When
And
was
then the third
that?
one is, this was back in 2001.
Oh,
I
okay.
watched the Mayday episode on it. That's how I know about it.
Gotcha.
Or the
Okay.
air crash investigations. Yeah, and then the third one is a midair between a fighter jet and a Cessna 150, and they're all cases that John has worked on and used simulation as part of the process.
Huh. That's
Yeah,
fascinating, man. That sounds like a really awesome panel. When is that panel then? Is that Saturday or Sunday?
that is Sunday at 12:45.
Okay. You're packing that one at the end for a reason, aren't you?
Yeah, well, it's all actually, the biggest thing is Saturday we have a lot of the developer seminar series events going on. So we have
Right.
7 different developers presenting on Saturday, and that just limits how much you can do. Plus, on Saturday morning we also have our opening, and then you may notice there is strategically a hole in the schedule after ours and before Rob Machado's that we're potentially hoping there might be a certain keynote from a certain company that won't be named that could very nicely fit in that window if things were to
Hmm.
work out, right?
Whatever
No
could
idea who
that
I could be
be?
talking about. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's because sometimes the keynote runs a little bit long. Like we've seen that
Sure.
happen in the past, and
Yeah. So it's there
that's
just in case.
fantastic. Yeah, no, that's fantastic, man. I'm yeah. I got to make it a point to try to get to some of the talks. The problem is like you get on the expo floor, and
Yeah.
like and I've talked about this in the past, but it's kind of weird being like a minor celebrity. And Max is going to get this year now. He's not going to be able to walk around the floor without getting ambushed. But it's like you just end up talking and talking and talking and talking and talking before you realize it's like 5 o'clock and it's time for the social. And you're like, well, where the hell
Yep.
did the day go?
Yep.
So I'll try to. I
I mean,
definitely want to
fortunately,
go ahead.
everything's online this year too, so all the live
That was
streams
the
will be
next
there
question.
and everything will be on YouTube, which will be good for you. So for people who can't make it and actually attend the seminars, of course, you'll be able to get all that stuff on YouTube, just as you are able to get all of our 2019 stuff on YouTube right now.
Flight Gear's coming to Expo. You heard it here. That's cool, man. Yeah, so that's exciting. So So that's those are the exhibitors. Those are the speakers. As far as the event goes, is there anything else? I want to talk about, how you decided on Vegas and all that stuff, the kind of conversation we've had in the past. But is there anything about 2020 that you kind of want to hit on that we haven't talked about yet?
I think just the stuff that people sometimes maybe overlook a little bit is the travel discounts that we have for our attendees. And I find a lot of people are surprised when they look at our website afterwards. They've already booked their flights and they realize they could have saved themselves some money. So Delta, Southwest, and WestJet, we've got discounts with all three airlines. They're not huge discounts. You might save, 10, 15 bucks depending on what ticket you buy. If you're going, long haul international on business class, you're going to save a little bit more money than if you're booking Southwest's want to get away fare. But we do have, you get extra bonus reward points on Southwest as well as the actual monetary discount. The discount for me, so funnily enough, I'm flying from Toronto, and we have a deal with Delta and we have a deal with WestJet. And those two are actually working together. They have a pretty intense code sharing agreement. So
Nice.
I priced out the flight with our FlightSimExpo discount, and it was the same flight operated by WestJet, but it was cheaper to buy it through Delta with our Delta deal than it was to buy it through WestJet with our WestJet deal.
Of course.
But anyway, you have a look at that stuff. So those are fantastic for the car rentals. If people wanted to do that and drive out to the Grand Canyon or have a look at some of the other stuff nearby, we've got a 30% off deal with the Enterprise group of companies. So that's kind of cool. And then beyond that, there's a whole list of discounted attractions, a bunch of dining information and stuff like that on our website too. So people sometimes tend to overlook that. And if you're one of those people, encourage you to have a look at it. As I say, it's not going to be a huge discount, but the more people that use it every year, the more I can go back to Delta and back to Southwest and say, look, here's 400 or 500 bookings that you might not otherwise have had.
Right.
So can we talk about ways to improve that? So the more people that are using it and that are finding it's valuable to them, the better for us. So I like to highlight that one. And then of course I'll talk about our room rate as well. We work very hard on room rates, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this when we start to look at 2021 and convention center versus hotel and everything else. But we're down to an average of $150 a night, including all the taxes and fees. If you stay for 3 days, stay for 4 days, it'll be even cheaper because the other nights are just $65 a night as opposed to the weekends, which are a little bit more expensive. Get a bunch of great benefits, and then for people who are kind of wondering about what to do, everything is fully refundable up to 48 hours prior to check-in as well. So you really can't go wrong there.
Nice. You're staying at the Venue Hotel, right?
Oh yeah, I always stay there.
Oops.
It doesn't. I mean, I know you guys that are quote unquote. You call yourself a minor celebrity. I think it maybe is a little more than that. But anyway, I know you guys like to get away. But for me, it's just it's really nice to be in the middle of everything. All the exhibitors are there.
Yep.
All the attendees are there, and it's really easy for me to just walk out from my room and I'm like right there on the show floor. I don't have to worry about what happens if I forget something or where am I going to leave my backpack for the day. So for me, it's really good to be there. And like I say, everyone is there. So when you're someone like me who's trying to find people like you, it's a lot easier when I'm at the event hotel.
Right. Yeah, actually, I'm staying at the event hotel this year. I learned that Vegas, the last 2 years ago in Vegas, I realized that it's a lot different going to Vegas and staying in the hotel than it is going to Hartford and staying in the same hotel.
Yes.
Like it was very easy to disappear. Now that being said, I got to tell you about this place. I stayed at the Ellis Island Brewery and Casino, which was it was really sketchy, behind Paris. And they had 22-ounce drafts for $2 a piece.
That is awesome.
And it was amazing. And the food was cheap and awesome. That place was fantastic, but definitely not the Venue Hotel.
Well, in fact, to exactly that point, we went out to the community a couple months ago and we basically said, all right, if you're a Vegas expert, if you've been there a whole bunch, where do you think we should send people? And we took those recommendations and incorporated them onto that same website page that RQ the Redbird posted in the chat a couple minutes ago. So if you scroll down and look at the section on other dining options, you'll see a bunch of recommendations that come directly from the community on our Facebook page. And again, we're just trying to give people that opportunity to, what's the best option. So a lot of Vegas locals or a lot of people who do the, annual couple of flights a year to Vegas, these are the places that they recommended. And as I was putting this together, I was like, yeah, I have to go to a few of these.
Oh no, how horrible.
The one you mentioned didn't come up, but the Stage Door Casino, which I actually have seen and I was afraid to walk into, has $1 Budweiser bottles and was one of the recommendations. It's actually right near Flamingo, so while we were there 2 years ago, I kept walking by it and I'm like, $1 beer is very tempting, but it just looked too sketchy.
I think I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, Yeah, no,
There's
the
a
one
really good Italian place right beside that, actually, Batista's Hole in the Wall, which was also recommended, actually.
I did see that. Yeah, I did remember seeing that. Oh, that's fantastic. So how did we end up in Vegas this year?
Vegas this year, and it's the same way we're deciding on 2021. It all comes down to attendee feedback. So for
Mhm.
people who are on our Facebook or who are on our mailing list, just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, yeah, we sent out an email and also posted across social media for our 2021 location survey. If somebody has the link and wants to post it in the chat, that
Please
would
do.
be awesome. And if not, I can share it later, but it's also on our Facebook and on our Twitter and our Instagram. We are literally running the survey as we speak, and I can talk to a little bit of the results as they come in. We've had just
Yeah.
over 400 replies so far in not even 24 hours, so that's kind of cool.
How many people want to
And
go back to Vegas?
so Vegas, let me find that answer. It's Vegas is, well, the way we've asked it is we've kind of asked people to rate each of the cities. So Vegas is kind of in the middle of that rating.
Okay.
Vegas and Orlando are fairly similar. I'd say nobody likes Atlantic City. These are all
Yeah.
early responses as well, but Atlantic City didn't do very well. Atlanta didn't do terribly well. A lot of
Really?
ones for that one. I can tell you, in terms of the best cities that people seem to like, San Diego got a lot of fives.
Okay.
Orlando and Vegas both got a lot of fives out of 5 point scale. And then we also asked people if you had to pick just one, where do you think we should
Yeah.
go? So 27% said San Diego, 19% said Orlando, and then third place is kind of tied between Vegas, Atlanta, and Schaumburg. And then you've got San Antonio with
Huh.
9% and Atlantic City with 6%. But again, this is early days, and there's literally replies coming in here as we speak. And this is only one component of what we look at.
Yeah.
So of course we're looking at the attendees, but we also do in parallel to this a discussion with our exhibitors and
Yep.
anybody else who's sort of opted into what we call a location focus group. So we have a subset of our developers that have asked us for a little bit more involvement, and so we're literally sending them pictures from our site visits. Here's the room rate, here are some of our notes on the property, and
Okay.
really going into depth, and then having them look at the website, having them look at the location, and give us some really in-depth feedback, not just on the city, but also on the area and the property itself.
So how did you guys decide on those cities?
So these 7 or so cities in this list came from a survey that we did about a year and a half ago, where
Mhm.
we went out to the community. We looked at every Class B airport in the US and we said, what's your favorite? And so that gave us an idea of what the most popular cities were. And then, in addition to looking at those most popular cities, we also go out through all the national chains. So your Marriott's, your Hyatt's, all the
Yeah.
big hotels that have properties in every city. And we basically said, here's our show, what's going to work for us. And through that process, we identified about 50 different properties in, I think it's 24 states, something like that,
Okay.
that had viable options. And we went through and sent them a specific request for proposal. And we talk about our events, what we need, and what the types of requirements are. And then from that, we eliminated at least 20 of those different properties basically on the room rate alone. So one of
Right.
the first criteria we look at is obviously space, and that eliminates a whole bunch of them. We need about 25 to 30,000 square feet as an absolute minimum
Okay.
for our exhibit hall space.
Just
And
so
that's
real quick
just,
to compare, what do we
yeah,
got what do we have at the Flamingo? Or sorry, the
yeah.
Tropicana.
So Tropicana is about that number,
Okay.
and Orlando was a little bit less than that number.
Okay.
But basically, what you're looking for is like 60 to 70 exhibitors, or about 100 10 by 10 exhibit booths if you weren't to combine any of them. And so similar sizes of the space that we had in both Orlando and Vegas, and that's what we are
Okay.
looking at.
Nice.
So
So
to
how does
find that,
go ahead, sorry.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, to find that is not easy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I mean, you and I had a pretty long chat about it a while back about, these cities work and these cities don't work and the right
Yeah,
like basically not repeating some of the stuff that happened with the old event in Hartford.
yeah, I think that the challenge is that when you go to sort of a city like Orlando or Vegas, there are easily 10 or 15 properties
Mhm.
that will have a 30,000 square foot ballroom, and it's no big deal.
Yep.
If I go to, and if you go to a big city like San Diego or LA, New York, you're going to find all kinds of those as well. However, if you go to a smaller city, so we get people that talk about Nashville, Indianapolis, Kansas City, those
Yeah.
seem to come up quite often. The problem with those cities is they might only have one or they might only have zero properties that even have that. So
Right.
Indianapolis is a good example. We have a follower who asks us about Indianapolis quite a bit. So I just had a conversation with our events planner specifically around Indianapolis. There are only 2 properties in the area that have a ballroom that's big enough. And both of those two properties, room rates for a hotel stay are about $250 a night. And so when you look at those
Whoa.
things, you can just say, all right, that's not going to work.
That's crazy. Cause I mean, I was originally from Indiana, and I look at Indianapolis as like, that's a really central location. Like that, to me, that would make sense. But that $250 a night. No thanks.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, when you are that size hotel,
Yeah.
you're that size hotel, you're the only one that's
Yeah,
within
that's fair.
anywhere close by. And so any big event that needs that kind of space that is looking at Indianapolis as a venue, they know that that's what kind of price they can command, and so that's what they charge, and that's what works for them. And
Gotcha.
for our attendees, we just think, $250 a night or even $200 a night is probably more than what most people are willing to pay.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the $250 a night would be like, I'm not sure I want to go.
Yeah. So I
Like,
think that's the challenge with
yeah.
a lot of places. So it's either, there's not enough space, the room rate is too high, or in a lot of cases, and believe it or not, 2021, a lot of hotels are already sold out for 2021, or
Right.
they are our weekend, which is a very popular weekend right at the end of spring, beginning of summer. It's a very popular time, especially in areas where it's starting to become summer, so the Northeast or the northern half of the US. It's really expensive to try and go there, or it's booked.
Yeah. Yeah, and Cosmic R5 makes a point about Gen Con being in Indianapolis, but Gen Con is like exponentially larger than FlightSimExpo. Like
Yeah,
they're targeting the Indiana Convention Center, which is downtown Indianapolis, which I would have to imagine is significantly more expensive than what you guys are looking for.
Yeah, so convention centers are a really interesting model for us to look at, and we asked this question on our survey.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a quick overview as to how the economics of this show work for people who aren't in the conference business. This is all stuff that I learned in the past 5 or 6 years. When you go to a big hotel and you say to them, I want to rent basically all your space, but I'm going to bring in 1,700 people, many of whom are going to stay at your property. They get pretty excited about that. And so when we go and we do these deals with a hotel, typically what happens is we get the exhibit hall space and we get our meeting room space for free in exchange for guaranteeing that we're going to fill a certain number of their hotel rooms and that we're going to give them a whole bunch of money to their restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So we have certain minimums that we have to meet, both for the number of rooms that are booked, plus the amount of money we have to spend on things like our social event, our lunches, our exhibitor VIP rooms, those kinds of things. And so if you look at a hotel model, that works for us because instead of having to spend money on space, we can basically spend that money on giving everyone a great social event and buying a couple beers, and we're all pretty happy. If you look at a convention center, obviously there's no hotel rooms to deal with. So convention centers are making their money on the space rentals and a little bit on food and beverage, but not to the same extent. And for that reason, instead of us basically getting space for free, if you look at a place like the Indianapolis Convention Center, or you go into any of these other cities where the convention center is their biggest space, of course they have space for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of, do we want to be spending $50,000 a day to rent that space?
Right. Yeah, and you look at an event like PAX, in the Boston Convention Center, that's
Yeah.
50, 60,000 people going to come through there and
Yeah.
paying, $125 a day to be there.
Yeah.
Like that can get pretty ridiculous. Or $60 a day, I think it is.
Yep. And we looked at I looked at one point at the convention center in Boston, and actually the bigger challenge, in addition to the fact that it'd be expensive to rent
Mhm.
out their space, is where are you going to stay there?
Yeah.
Because again, you're not going to find a hotel room in downtown Boston
Nope.
for under $100 a night, right? And that's what people are kind of looking for when you want to, yeah, that's sort of like $100 before taxes and fees kind of works out to like 150 all in, right? So that's the number we were looking for. You're just not going to find that in Boston. So even if
Yeah.
you wanted to go to the convention center, in June, if you want to go to Boston in like February, you could probably get that, right?
I'm not even going to guarantee you that, man.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah, you're right.
it's so expensive anywhere in this area, anywhere within probably 15, 20 miles of the city. You're looking at probably $200 to $300 a night for pretty much anything from like May through October.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Our question on
Nope.
the survey was, you have two choices. Do you want to run the event in hotels, be somewhat limited to the cities that we've seen in our surveys in the past, but keep the price the same and keep the social event? Or should we be looking at convention centers? Should we charge a little bit more for the event? We would remove the social, but it would allow us to go to places like Seattle or Indianapolis or potentially Boston, just places we haven't looked at before.
Right.
So that was the question. 60% to that, and this is early days so far. We've gotten like about 40 answers as I've been talking, which aren't factored into this. So I'm sure those are going to continue. But 60% are saying keep with the hotel, 40% are saying consider a convention center. So there's a good mandate there to consider convention centers for sure, but the preference, by about 10% there would be to key in and keep doing what we've been doing. And of course, as we grow and as we see this event continue to expand, there's always the potential that that decision gets made for us. We're
Right.
on the borderline right now in a lot of cities where we are just, filling up hotels, but we're not quite big enough for convention centers. So in another 2 or 3 years, if the growth trajectory continues and we're at 3,000 or 4,000 attendees, now you almost are forced into a convention center model.
So that was my next question. That is, where is that line drawn? Because I'm assuming you're planning for 2 to 2,500 this year, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say it does depend. Like some of the options we just looked at for 2021 have 40,000 square foot ballrooms. So
Okay.
you could easily get to 3,000 or 4,000 attendees on those sites. Other ones are more like 20 or 15,000 in their biggest ballroom, and you'd be looking at running 2 separate ballrooms for exhibit hall, and you'd be looking at running a couple of different rooms for meetings.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the configuration of the hotel and the space and what's available. But I would think that when you hit 4,000 or 5,000 attendees for sure, there's very few hotels that are going to be able to achieve that without perhaps like taking up their whole space. But then again, I saw a couple of places, the one in Schaumburg, for example, it's actually a hotel that's built into and partnered very closely with the convention center. So you don't even know that you've left the hotel and you're
Right.
actually in the convention center now. That type of model would work really well for us. And that type of model also is one where we can actually get the convention center space for free by renting out the hotel. So there's a couple places like that. Minneapolis has a setup like that, and a few other cities where the convention center and a hotel work very closely together. But again, it's a factor of can we get the room rate there,
Yeah.
and are attendees going to be willing to travel there, and does it kind of make sense? And that's the other component that we look at with this is how easy is it to get there from Europe, to get there from South America. We have so many international attendees that take part in the show, and even from the US. I mean, if you're not flying into another of a hub city, it can be very difficult to get to a place like San Antonio, for example.
Boston sucks. Like, it's impossible to get direct flights to half these places.
Getting better though.
It's getting better. They're working on it. But
because Delta now is making it a focus city, I think, and JetBlue has had a focus city there for a while. American, I want to say, is expanding the presence. This
actually,
is all,
American.
free the past 2 months, but
speaking of Indianapolis, American just started offering direct flights to Indianapolis, and
I
actually booked round trip first class tickets for $380 in August. I was very excited about that. Now they're on an Embraer 170, so they're first class light.
Hey, don't knock the 170.
Oh, why would that be?
Yeah.
Well, we have a question from our resident AV expert, Ben Farney, and Ben asks, how much is your house AV how much are they fleecing you on in-house AV?
Yeah, a lot. Would be the short answer. We learned a lot the first year we were in Vegas, and in Vegas at most of the properties you are pretty much restricted to using the in-house AV, which is not always the case. We learned a lot from our first go in Vegas, so we actually have a lot of those negotiations up front before we sign a contract. What we've learned is that I have very little leverage over an AV company, but the hotel who has the deal with them to make them their exclusive provider, they have a pretty big hammer that they can put down on those guys.
Nice.
And so we talk about that at the outset when we're looking at renting and getting some space in this venue. We actually say, let's see what your pricing is and all this stuff. What kind of a discount can you offer us? And that becomes part of our negotiations. So no doubt, if you were to look at the price of a microphone that we're charged from the hotel's in-house company versus an outside provider, it's going to be a lot more.
Yeah.
When you factor in the discounts that we're able to negotiate, it actually brings the price to a pretty reasonable point. And I'll say we've been pretty happy with the in-house AV, particularly last year in Orlando. They were a great team on site there. Everything we needed was there. Everything we needed, if we just basically snapped our fingers, it would show up. And the pricing was reasonable because we had a good conversation up front about expectations. So nice. I would say that we learned a lot in our first year. It was not a great year in Vegas the first time, but so far this year has been a lot better. And certainly last year in Orlando, things couldn't have gone better for us.
Nice. Well, check out this segue, because my next question was going to be about live streaming and some of the recorded stuff you're planning on doing.
Nice.
So are you guys going to be live streaming from the event? You mentioned recordings on YouTube of all this stuff, but I'm
just
self-serving.
like we did last year. Yeah, no, just like we did last year. So when it comes to the seminars on Saturday and Sunday, we've hired a professional crew to come in and record those. And I know there's lots of people who come to this show who
Okay.
could do this work for us too, but I just didn't want to ask
Nope.
an attendee who otherwise might want to be there for sim to sit in a room and just, do nothing for the whole time. So we've got a professional crew to come in and do that. Everything on Saturday and Sunday will be live streamed. It all ends up on our YouTube about a
Okay.
week after the show. For the actual seminars, that covers that. But for the exhibit hall, basically that's up to you, Ty.
Yeah. No, we're working on that.
Yeah. So
Well, you know what? We rely on people that are walking around with their phones and selfie sticks for most of that.
yep, that's
So
exactly it. I
you
mean,
get
there's
the
no point in us.
you got the Chili
We're not gonna
Willies,
try
and you
and
got
take
the who else live
Right.
streams? I don't think Dirk is going this year, but a bunch of guys always walk around with their phones. So Fly Purdue whenever he shows up.
Yep.
So that'll be a good time. So are you guys gonna live stream that seminar stuff on Twitch or on YouTube or both?
That'll be on the FlightSimExpo YouTube. I think that worked out well for us last
Okay.
year. I think we'll just probably stick to that. But of course, as you just said, we have a specific media Wi-Fi network that is
Yeah.
designed to hopefully allow you guys to stream really well. From what I heard, it worked in Orlando. I don't know if that was actually the case, but no one's complained. So
Yeah, our issues in Orlando, I think, were not because of that internet connection, but yeah, I tried to do some live streaming from the PilotEdge booth, and I think that they might have been having some software issues with their stuff that was essentially preventing for us from being able to control, or them from being able to control. So, yeah, that was a different story. But hopefully, like last year, like I said, I think it was a lot better.
Yeah,
Vegas.
so we tried to make a big investment in that, and we're doing the same thing again in Vegas. So hopefully, a lot of the media partners can come in and can actually live stream the floor. But I gotta say, I mean, I don't really know why you would sit and watch a live stream of the floor. Like, to me, the whole point of the floor is so you can go and try the different hardware, and you could try this yoke, and you could try these pedals. I don't really know how much fun it is to watch somebody do that, but that's just me.
You'd be surprised, man. There's a group of people out there that come in every Friday night and watch me fly an airliner. So.
Yeah, but that's because they can't be at FlightSimExpo at the same time.
Well, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, the people that are going to watch aren't going to be the people that are there.
Yeah.
It'd be the guys walking around with their selfie sticks saying, "Hey, look at this, check this out," and then everybody on the internet's like, "Ooh, ah," but telling us how much better Cosford is. I'm just kidding, of course.
Yeah, exactly. I love Cosford. This is a great show. I've been there.
I haven't been over there yet, man.
You need to go. It's fun.
It's on my list. I got a little bundle of joy downstairs that's going to keep me from going for a year or two.
Fair enough.
Cool. Well, I'm excited about that stuff too, because I know that like live streaming and sort of watching that stuff digitally has always been a challenge, and especially like the previous event, and then also even the Vegas event. I think we were relying on people with their cell phones recording stuff.
Yeah.
To put it online, and it just was like less than ideal. Put it that way.
Yeah. Well, you don't have great. The problem is the audio more than anything else.
Exactly.
Like you're sitting there with your phone trying to record what someone is saying through speakers. It's going to sound awful, right?
Yep.
So we got a lot of feedback on that in Vegas, and it's crazy expensive. I think the live streaming is somewhere in the realm of about 15 to 20 grand that we have to pay to do 2 days worth of live streaming. But when you look at the quality of it, I mean, if you go to our YouTube page right now, it's professional quality. The audio is crystal clear. The video is presented with the speaker in a little box beside it. Like it couldn't be any better. And I think people have really appreciated the fact that they can get online and they can watch a lot of this stuff. If I go have a look at some of the there you go. You have it open right now. But having a look at some of these, like 15, 1600 views on a couple of these videos, and that's great if people can see some of this stuff online and benefit from it. I'm just looking at our intro to at-home flight simulation here that has about 300 views. This was the one that was a panel discussion with Jason Miller and Flight Shops. Some of the developer seminars that we had from last year had some really good viewership. Like this one has about 1600 on it. So I think that's good stuff. And as I say, if people can see this stuff at home and watch it and benefit from it, then it's totally worth it for us.
Nice. That's fantastic. Like I said, we're all around here. We're all self-serving. So you'll get Jeff there, who will be all about making the YouTube videos, but that's too much work, man. They work too hard.
You know what? That stuff is great for us. And the more publicity we have and the more opportunity we have to reach out to more of the community, people, I think it was funny when I was going through doing the 2021 site visits, one of the most common questions I would have from these hotels is, who's your biggest competition? Yeah. And I tell them the biggest competition is the basement. We've got to get people out of the basement.
No, that makes sense, man. That's a good point. So we hit on 2020, we hit on 2021, we hit on exhibitors and speakers and everything else. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I think the only other thing we could mention and see what people have to say about is the possibility of a third day. That's something we've been throwing
Okay.
around for the past little while when it comes to this is 2021 now. And we thought we had a lot of people, particularly last year in Orlando, that were business, military, government, and they came to our Captain's Corner on Friday, kind of hoping to be able to see the exhibit hall, but knowing
Right.
that they couldn't. And they were like, I really wanted to see more of this show, but it's a weekend. I work for the government. That's just not going to happen. So I think if there's an opportunity to bring some more of those people into the show and to maybe even bring some exhibitors who otherwise wouldn't come on a just purely weekend event, that's kind of an interesting discussion point for us. So if people have a thought around what maybe might be beneficial about doing a Friday, I think how we would do it is we'd run Captain's Corner on the Friday morning. We would do 2 or 3 hours of exhibit hall on Friday afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
and then just run the regular Saturday and Sunday as we've been doing. And that's something that we've been thinking about doing. We almost did that in Vegas this year, and I think we are planning to do it next year in wherever we end
Yeah.
up going. So any thoughts that you have on that, or any thoughts that the audience has on that, we'd be interested in for sure.
Yeah, I mean the Friday thing is always fun. I know that, and this wasn't last year, but in the Vegas show 2 years ago, Friday was amazing. I went down, I hung out while people were getting badges and whatnot, and I was there for probably 3 or 4 hours, just as as folks were coming in, as attendees were coming in, and exhibitors and whatnot, and it was a great time to just shoot the breeze. And like one of the
Yeah,
things I'm thinking about is trying to say, hey, let's all the people that love the stream and do all this stuff, like let's just go meet at a bar Friday night and grab a
yeah,
couple of beers. Like Friday is always like, for these types of events, Friday is always like way more laid back than the other nights for sure. And I don't know if it still stay that way, obviously, with an event being on a Friday, but I'd be all for it, man. Like I think an extra sort of half a day, if you will. If that were the case, would you guys make Captain's Corner still an extra thing, or would it be a part of like the base attendee, or is it too early to say? You
yeah.
think?
I mean, it's probably too early to say definitively, but I can
Yeah.
just give you my perspective. I do think that having Captain's Corner as the add-on is a nice piece. Like for us, that helps a little bit. I mean, it's only 10
Mm-hmm.
or 15 bucks to add that on, but if you are going to come the extra day, that extra little bit of revenue definitely helps make the
Yeah.
difference for us. So I think we would keep that in play, but I think it would also include access to the exhibit hall on Friday. So you'd do the $15 add-on, and you'd get Captain's Corner in the morning. You'd get the exhibit floor in the afternoon, but we could
Gotcha.
we could think about that. The real reason for the add-on this year is we didn't want people thinking they could just come on Friday and get the full FlightSimExpo experience. We
Yeah.
wanted them to understand that you need to actually come in on Saturday or Sunday. So if Friday was a full day, we might decide to change that logic around a little bit.
Makes
But we
sense.
really didn't want people, coming only for the Friday and thinking, oh, they're going to see the whole show, and then being disappointed when they got there and finding out it's actually just a series of seminars. So we'll have a look at that in the future, and we may adjust that a little bit.
Suggestion from Mike72: maybe offer a commercial level access to the floor for a few hours too. Purchase that level.
Huh.
He would purchase that level for his business needs and passed up a lot of booths because they were impossible to get to.
Yeah,
And
that is actually an interesting point. I see that Will also throws in the idea of maybe an early access pass for media
yeah,
partners and stuff. So
yep,
kind of interesting thought. Like, what if on the Friday morning you had a certain ticket that you could purchase for
right,
maybe only limited to 200 or 300 people, and just those people, whether they be media or business or whomever, can come in, and then the general public gets in on Friday afternoon. Of course, the challenge there is getting all the exhibitors to be willing to put their stuff together time, because it's a,
yeah,
it's a challenge even right now to get everybody ready for Saturday morning. So if
yep.
we tell them, no, actually you've got to be ready for the Friday, that adds an extra day, if not more, for setup for them. So that's a consideration for us too.
And I know that PAX East, for example, for the first hour of their, so they run their show Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, here in Boston, and for the first hour of Thursday, it's press day. It's basically the press
Yeah.
hour. So everybody with a media badge or a press badge, and obviously exhibitors and whatnot, get in and get an hour on the floor to just go and do whatever they have to do. And I know that that's something that for them is a hugely successful thing, and also gets all those content creators and all those media folks in on the very first day, which is good
Yep.
for ongoing coverage and stuff like that.
Yep.
That's interesting though. I don't know that I've noticed too many issues being able to see stuff. I've certainly had issues trying to have conversations with folks on Saturday and Sunday just because of how crowded the floor can get. I normally just stick around at the very end. Usually at the end of Saturday or Sunday, people start to clear out, and if you want to have a chat with somebody, that's usually a time that you can do it. I think 2 years ago, Jeff Faviano, Mr. Crosswind from Majestic Software, and myself we hung out for like 2.5 hours after the show actually ended. It's just
Nice.
shooting the breeze, man, while everybody was tearing their stuff down. It was kind of awesome. Like that,
Yeah.
that expo floor was pretty much barren by the time we finally were like, oh, maybe we should leave. Not that I'm encouraging everybody to do that, but
Yeah, I was probably like one of the people standing at the door being like, would you just get out already? That's what I feel like after a flight, actually. Like sometimes
Yeah.
we have people that just take forever to get their stuff,
Yeah.
and we're all four of us, myself and the flight attendants, are just sitting there being like, get the fuck off our plane. We want to go to
Yeah.
the hotel, damn it.
Exactly.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say
understand.
fuck on stream, sorry.
Don't worry about it, man. It's fine. We're super casual here, so it's not a big deal.
Anyway, someone asked about Captain's Corner add-on. Yes, you can add that on for Friday. Send us an email if you wanted to toss that onto registration, and we can take care of that for you.
Is there a deadline for adding that on, or is it just shooting an email anytime?
No, you can do it right up to the day of. You can do it on site too. Last year we had a bunch of people that showed up on Friday for Captain's Corner, and we were able to do it mostly without a lineup. I think we've gotten our stuff together enough that we can do that with a pretty small line, but you just always run that risk if you wait to the last minute, that if there's a bunch of other people that waited until the last minute, you might have a bit of a lineup. But we can definitely take care of it on the show site as well. It might be a little bit more expensive. Last year we had to charge a little bit more when we did it day of, because we get hit with a bit more credit card fees when you do stuff last minute.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Anything else you want to hit on then?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, I think where we are right now is kind of, to bring it back to what we started talking about at the beginning, is we just need to decide what we're doing this year. So as we have on our website, encourage people to just stay in touch. Keep an eye on that PDF that was linked. It's just linked right off the homepage, FlightSimExpo.com. We've got a little link for COVID-19 information. And I would just encourage people to keep an eye on that, keep an eye on their emails, and be aware of when we send out our surveys to people asking for their opinions on how we move forward with the show. Those are the biggest things I think we can do right now. And once it comes time, in probably mid to late April is my guess, we'll have a series of votes with the community, with the attendees, with the developers. At the end of the day, we're going to just do what people think is the best choice. So if everyone's telling us they want us to postpone, we'll do that. If everyone's telling us they want us to go, that's probably what we'll do as well, assuming that that's all possible. So keep in touch, stay in touch with us on social media, keep an eye on your email, and we'll know a whole lot more, I think, about how our lives are going to continue to fold out in the next couple of weeks.
A lot of stuff going on, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna open it up to chat here. If anybody has any last minute questions, we'll hang out for a few more minutes and let some of those come in. I think I've gotten many of them on the way in here. Now they're all just sort of talking amongst themselves. Yeah, no, man, it's been fantastic having you come on today. I appreciate it. So what's next? What's next in the planning? What's next in the big push? Obviously, there's the 2021 survey, but like, is there a deadline coming up or anything?
I think for us right now, the big thing is just making that decision and trying to figure out what our lives look like. As to say, probably in about mid-April. Our exhibitor registration deadline doesn't happen until May 1st. We changed our pricing around this year. We don't have any major price increases for attendees planned, which is nice for people, so they can take their time a little bit to register if they wanted to. And so I think for us, it's just a little bit of sit back and just wait and see what happens. Gotcha. This is actually normally the time where I'm out there doing these streams, and I'm out there trying to encourage registrations, and I'm out there trying to talk to developers, but it just doesn't make any sense to do that right now. So it's kind of a nice break, to be honest. And
that's good.
We know that if things shape up in the next week or two and world starts to look back to normal and I can watch hockey again, if that all happens, we know that it's going to be super busy. So it's nice to just take a bit of a break.
You've of course seen the post going around that as soon as Canada canceled hockey, they announced that they were almost at a vaccine, right?
No, I actually did. Yeah, someone in Saskatchewan, I think, like the middle province that nobody knows anything about. I think they're really worried there that the CFL might get canceled, because I think the Saskatchewan Roughriders are all that province has going for it.
There was a question from Pilot to Fly. If Expo does get postponed, can you speak on how long that postponement would be, or is there unclear?
Yeah, I would again say that's going to come back to what the community wants us to do. Part of the survey question that we'll ask, if people are saying, no, we don't want to go ahead with June, is would you like to see it in July? Would you like to see it in August? Would you like to see it in 2021? I think for us, the concern, and it's not saying we couldn't do it, it's just things to think about. We've got Oshkosh in July, so that's one you obviously don't want to get too close to. We've got Cosford in October. We've got school starting in
Oh, yeah,
September.
right.
You know, do you really want to go to Vegas in August? So those are sort of the questions we'd have to look at if we decided to
Yep.
to go ahead. And then of course the other thing is the hotel, right? So I'm sure lots of people who might be choosing to run events at a different time could be looking at that time frame.
Yep.
How much is the room going to be? Do they have the space available? Those are all questions we'd have to look at too. I can give you my personal opinion. Like I don't know if I would really want to see it in August versus just see it in 2021. That's
Yeah.
just me, but I'm not going to be the one to decide. So
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, I have a ridiculous travel schedule every year, and this year is no exception. And if you said, "Hey, we're doing this in August," I'd say, "All right, man, have fun," because I got way too much else going on in August personally.
right, and that is
And
that is
that's
true. Like people have planned vacations, people
yeah,
have planned their time off, right? So it's a question of whether or not we can make that switch easily, and a lot of that will come down to the developer community too. If I have 80 or 90% of the exhibitors saying, "Yeah, let's do it in August," that's a very different question than if 40% of them say, "Yes, I can do it in August," and the rest are saying, "No, sorry, we're going to be planning for Cosford then."
fantastic. Now we got the Canadians talking trash to each other about their NHL teams. So
I know.
I think
I was
that's
gonna say this is the best result the Leafs could have hoped for. That's for sure.
mission accomplished. I think you would say.
It'd be the least losses the Leafs have ever had in a season because they wouldn't have gotten to play enough
Oh
games.
man, that's throwing down the salt right there.
I've been a Toronto sports fan for too long. I'm bitter and salty for life now.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, yeah. I remember when
Yeah.
I was in grade school and whatnot, the Blue Jays were pretty good, right?
Yeah, back in
Like,
the early 90s.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a long
Sorry
time.
to date
But
you.
Recon.
no, it's all right.
Didn't
It's
mean
all
to do
right.
that.
They all know that I'm old, so that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I think
No, that's right. The 92, 93 years, I think, for the Blue Jays were the
yeah,
last 4 years. There was a little bit of a playoff hope there a couple of years ago too, but like I've seen way too many Toronto Boston hockey series to be able to have any hope about a Toronto hockey team anymore.
right. Yeah, that's fair. I don't know anything about sports, so I sit back and I'm like, oh, sports are canceled. Well, that doesn't change my life at all, except now that
Yeah.
there's potentially more people going to be watching Twitch during the day. So
There you go.
yeah.
I want to know what is SportsCenter showing right now? Like, what is ESPN going to do?
Oh,
Like,
man,
I can't imagine they have any like they got nothing, right? They can just show like highlights of darts.
Well, I mean, like the NBA, I think is they're like there's like the NBA 2K series now where they're playing like NBA 2K.
Are they really? Oh my
I think
god.
so, yeah. Like there was oh man, one of the teams, the Suns or like one of the NBA teams has a like esports NBA 2K team, and they're like, yeah, they're still playing, man, they're still going. I doubt it's the players that are playing, but like they're
Yeah,
still, you know, it's like Jeff mentioned earlier with iRacing and NASCAR and whatnot.
True, yeah. Actually, that is an interesting question, and if people want to chat about this question too, and we'll certainly ask about it in our surveys. Is there some opportunity to run some portion of FlightSimExpo in an online version,
Yeah.
right, where we get all the media partners like you to host one big massive Twitch stream or something like
Yeah.
that, and we do 5 or 6 of the seminars, or we have some of the developers come on and talk about products, and do we do something like that if we can't do a real event? So that might be something to consider too.
Well, that might be something to keep an eye on E3 for, because that's almost certainly what they're going to end up doing.
Yeah.
And I think actually Apple announced yesterday or the day before that their mobile, whatever their conference is going to be completely remote, like completely digital. So it'll be interesting to see, these companies that typically hold in-person events have to look at, okay, what the hell else can we do so that we can at least keep this audience? Will they look towards more live streaming stuff or co-streaming or things along those lines? Like I said, Nintendo's kind of forged a path for doing exactly that kind of stuff with their pre-rendered, pre-made videos that they show live on at whatever intervals they have, whenever they've got a product announcement to make, and then people end up just going nuts over that stuff.
Yeah, although I wonder if that, like, I mean, I think we could probably keep people interested for a few hours. I don't see that being like a whole weekend thing. And honestly, for me, the thing about Expo that's really cool is, number one, it's obviously the like meeting people and the community and all that stuff. But also it's the fact that you can try all this hardware. Like I would never, buy a VR headset myself probably, or at least I never would have until I tried it. Now I've seen it and I'm like, holy crap, right? But I wouldn't have gone out and bought a, whatever they are, $500 or $600 headset without having tried it first.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to a lot of the hardware that we see at a show like this. So I don't see any way that you can replicate that in the online world.
Oh, 100%, I agree. And some of those vendors show up at Oshkosh, some of those vendors show up at Sun and Fun and whatnot, but it's a very different environment when you're, at a sim event inside in the air conditioning and all that. So yeah. Are you going to Oshkosh this year?
I want to.
Okay.
I was gonna bid the days off to go to Sun and Fun, and now that just changed. The thing with Oshkosh that's really difficult is I don't know how you freaking get there and where you stay.
Yeah, you fly to Green Bay or Milwaukee or Chicago, and if you haven't booked a hotel or a room now, you're staying in Chicago, Milwaukee, or Green Bay.
Yeah, that's what I did last year. I flew into Milwaukee, and then I stayed in a small town about halfway between Milwaukee and Oshkosh. I went to some like hick bar there. It was actually really fun.
Dude,
Anyway,
I love the Midwest.
that's what I did last year. Yeah, it was great. So I did that, but I was really only able to stay there for a day because it was about an hour and a half drive from where I was to Oshkosh, and I didn't really want to do that again. But it was nice to walk around. It was a really cool air show the day I was there, and so I think I'll try and go there again. Are you going?
I go there for work. Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay.
I'll be there.
I
get in like the Saturday night before the event, and then I'll be there for 10 days, I think.
Nice.
But I get to pretty much I get to spend most of my time this year in the Pilot Proficiency Center, which is an air conditioned tent.
I was there. That is nice.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was in there for a bunch of the time. We had a couple meetings, and every time I got to walk in there, I was like,
yeah, dude, it's fantastic. Yeah, the two times I've been there, I've gotten to spend a lot of time in that building, and now officially that's where I'm gonna probably be next year. So it'll be a good time. Sun and Fun is not canceled, Jeff. They've postponed it. I think they said the current estimate is May.
Yeah.
So I don't imagine they'll cancel that. Like, the problem with a lot of these shows is that, and it's probably the same for you guys too, is like these are the money makers that keep these organizations afloat in some cases.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine EA.
When I look at,
go ahead.
You were just talking about some of the big shows like Microsoft, or I know Adobe pulled out of their show that was supposed to be in Vegas. If you're Adobe and you run a big show every year, like, it's kind of an easy decision to not run it because you can just save yourself whatever amount of millions of dollars you have to spend on that show. I'm not saying that there's not a challenge there. Of course, I'm sure it's a difficult decision and there's all kinds of people who are disappointed. But when it's just a small component of your business, I think the natural choice is to cancel. And that's why it doesn't really bother me or worry me that a lot of other shows have canceled, because if I were Microsoft or if I were Apple and if I was planning my big annual show now, like, of course I would cancel it too, because I can save money and I'm not going to put my employees at risk of catching a disease. Like, that makes a lot of sense. When your whole business, like the way Oshkosh's AirVenture is, or the way that FlightSimExpo is for us, all we do is we run an event every year. It's kind of hard to have a business if you don't run an event.
Well, I think we got one last question here today. This is probably the most important question of the day. Strike Eagle 78 asks, what type of brown and orange floral pattern will be used for the show floor this year?
Well, he had a few of them actually. There was a question about I was okay with the question about the folding tables. That was folding chairs rather. But there was a question about what quality of tables are used for exhibits at FS Expo. I like that one.
Okay, well, you can talk about that if you want as well.
I honestly, I don't know how to answer that.
You hire
question.
the same company as everybody else that comes in and delivers that stuff. So
I'm sure it's like a 40-year aged oak with maple finish, and I'm sure it smells wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what we got for questions today, man. Parting thoughts, parting words before we wrap it up here.
Keep in touch. Follow us on social media. Please keep an eye on your emails. Please vote in the surveys. We're going to be using the community to make the decision as to what we do in 2020, and of course, as we move into the future, 2021 as well. So if you haven't already done our 2021 survey, we've had about 100 responses since I've been talking. Now is a great time to do that. And please keep in touch with us for 2020, and we'll certainly be communicating plenty about how we plan to move forward with this year's show over the next little while.
And expect only elbow bumps from Jeff.
That's right.
Yes, elbow bumps and fist bumps, I think, is what they're saying right now. Well, Evan, thank you very much, my friend, for coming on today. Thanks for talking to us. This is something I enjoy doing every single year, and a lot of times when the Saturday and Sunday streams come, I tell my wife, I'm like, I'm not sure I'm feeling this today, but that wasn't today. Like, I always enjoy doing this, man. So I really do appreciate you coming on.
Good deal. Thanks for having us. Appreciate the support.
If you're willing to stick around here for a couple minutes,
sure.
I'll grab you as soon as we're done. Give me about 5 minutes though, if you need to step away.
Perfect. I'll be here.
All right. I'm gonna mute Evan now, and I'm probably not gonna end up landing this plane after all this pain in the ass and all this rigmarole. Guys, thanks you for coming out. Thanks you for coming out It's been a blast today. It's always a blast having Evan and whatnot on here. And all the faces that we don't normally get to see here. Gun and Gamers, how you doing, by the way? Good to see you, buddy. And Jeff coming in, and everybody else, and of course the one and only Citation Max. Jeff and Half Shell Hero and J Snap and Steve PHL, thank you guys for the resubs. I apologize I didn't get to acknowledge those. And yeah, we will see you all on Monday at this point, I think. I might, if I'm feeling up for it, I might fire up a stream tomorrow of something that's absolutely not going to be a flight simulator. But we'll kind of see how that goes. So thanks again, folks. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday.